You're listening to Bigger Than Belief, real stories about real faith with real people whose belief is unbelievable. I'm your host, Adam Duxter. Thanks for listening to Bigger Than Belief. Today is Thursday, February 12th. Today, we're going to dive into part 2 of our sit-down interview we did with 3 local clergy members who were arrested and charged as part of a protest at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport on January 23rd. The 3 were part of a group of 99 clergy members from around the state who took part in that protest against Operation Metro Surge. In part 1, Reverend Katherine Lewis of St. David's Episcopal Church in Minnetonka, Reverend Daniel Ruth, Executive Director of Lutheran Partners in Global Ministries Minneapolis, and Reverend Amanda Lunemann of Grace United Methodist Church of Burnsville shared how they wound up at the airport that day. But they also shared their thoughts on Operation Metro Surge as a whole. If you haven't listened or watched to that episode 1 or that part 1 yet, I strongly encourage you do that before checking out part 2 today. Because today we're going to start off our conversation essentially halfway through, talking about empathy and compassion before diving into those 3 reverends' lasting thoughts about their arrests and how their faith is guiding them moving forward. So now, here is part 2 of our sit-down conversation with Reverend Katherine Lewis, Reverend Daniel Ruth, and Reverend Amanda Lunemann. Can we talk about compassion for a second? It seems to be a hot-button issue in the church right now, depending on who you talk to. I'm sure the 3 of you have seen it. What do you make of that? There are people who say, potentially your compassion can be leading you down maybe not a great path, right? I'm sure the 3 of you have seen that. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think I think compassion writ large is a wonderful thing. And I think that we have to think a little bit about sort of how does that compassion play out within the reality and the structures of power that we are living within. So I agree. I think it's important to have compassion for individual ICE agents. That's different than having compassion for the mission that they're on and their participation in that mission. I think about Dorothy Zola. No, not Dorothy Zola. I'm going to forget it.
Soleil?
Nope.
Elizabeth Schussler-Fierenza?
No, I'm sorry. I'm losing this. The woman, German philosopher who was watching the Nuremberg trials and talked about the banality of evil. And it was the evil that was perpetrated in Germany under Hitler and the Nazi regime and the Third Reich was perpetrated because there were so many people who weren't actively killing people. They weren't actively, engaged in the concentration camps. But there were a lot of people just doing middle management jobs, pushing paper around. And it doesn't mean that individual themselves is at heart an evil person. Right. And that's the compassion that we can see, that they're a human being trying to do their job or trying to do their best, but the system that they're in and that they're participating in is deeply evil. Right. And I think it's that banality of evil that we have to be really honest about in this context as well, that there are people who might at heart think that they're doing something that is just like, at best it's good and it's helpful, and at worst it's sort of like, I'm just trying to get by. But we can name that system that they're operating in is actually evil without having to say that the human being at the center of it is an evil. And I think that's the tension that we in our shared faith can probably hold, that there is, in the Lutheran tradition, we call it simul justus et peccator. It's the simultaneously justified and sinner, that there is a both and there. And I think it's important to have compassion from one human being to another, while also being able to call out where evil and where lies and dishonesty are happening in our world.
That was well said. Is there anything either of the two of you would want to add to that when we talk about compassion?
Yeah. Well, I was going to go down a different path, but around, may I for a second?
Yeah.
Around we confess on a when we worship together. Part of worship is a confession of sin, and this morning we confessed the evil that we have done and the evil done on our behalf. The three of us are not exempt from being complicit in evil systems.
Right.
I mean, like, it's not an us and them situation.
Yep.
We are all in this together,
Yep.
and I think that, having compassion on ourselves even.
Yeah.
But I really appreciated your distinction between the individual compassion versus not having compassion, calling out systems. It's hard to navigate one's life in the complexity of the systems in which we live. And the church is a complex system too, so how do we even navigate that? But what's so clear to me in this particular moment in history, in this moment in the Twin Cities and elsewhere, but it's just like so intense here, is that I would say that there are sides, like in which side are we going to be on? Are we going to be on the side of compassion for our neighbor? Or are we going to not call out our complicity in how we perpetuate these systems of oppression? And it's like, this is the moment where, I think it's such a clarity in my mind that this is a moment of there are sides, and which side do we want to be on?
And to go back to your question too about what the role of the church is, I think that the church writ large, and that goes much more beyond the Episcopal Church or the Methodist Church or the Lutheran Church or even all of them combined. I think that there has been over the last 30 years or so, a lot of fear and anxiety about what the role in the future of the church is as denominations across the U.S. see a declining number of folks joining churches or showing up to worship. And a lot of that, I think, right in this moment feels like it is sort of the decline of Christendom, the decline of sort of our assumption that we are the ones who have the power and the resources, and just can assume that if we build it, they will come. And we've had to start to unlearn that assumption that had been built over centuries at this point, where Christians were the ones in power. And I actually think there's a really interesting possibility in the middle of that. Because, as you mentioned, the prophetic voice, and I think that the prophets constantly brought this new imagination of not just saying that this is the world as it currently is, or this is how the church is and it will be that way forever. And so if we get anxious or scared about it, we just have to hold tighter, and we have to make sure that those forces that are causing the decline get pushed out. I think we get to reinterpret and reinvent and imagine new ways of being the church. And I think I see that happening right now in Minnesota, in all sorts of exciting ways, that the ways that people are coming together across denominational lines, across faith lines, people who don't even identify with a church are showing up for one another. And I think that at the center of that is church. I think that is faith lived out in our lives in action, and that is so exciting to me, that we can drop some of like the old empire ways of being the church and imagine into new creative ways of being in the world, and imagine where God is calling us to be in the future. And that's really an exciting place to be. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's really cool to see it happening.
The moment last Friday when your hands go behind your back.
In front of us,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Right in front.
You're restrained.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Yeah.
It was almost that moment was almost a little bit less adrenaline than I expected it to be. I think it was the moments before that felt like, I don't know what's coming. I don't, but I'm standing here, I'm starting to kneel, I'm singing, I'm praying. And then it was just like, okay, here we are. And I think the police who were there, likely because we were mostly white, privileged clergy people with collars on and stoles and all sorts of things, they treated us very kindly. And I think at that point it just felt like we had done what we came to do. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
Going back to your comment about it being mystical, on some level, just the whole experience, and then leading up to, getting down on our knees and praying, because that was what we ultimately came to do, was to bear moral witness in prayer on our knees, to show that humility, that we serve a loving God who loves neighbor, who loves the immigrant, right? Who loves those that systems and powers try to dehumanize. And being on our knees, I don't know if you felt this too, but it went from mystical for me into holy crap, because there's nothing like having a militarized police force. I actually chuckled a little bit because they sounded like stormtroopers coming in. But they had to show up in all the riot gear because that was protocol, right? But our backs were to them, right? And there's something to be said about how power and authority can operate in the dark, and how that can wreak havoc on people. So I felt that in that moment. And most importantly, Black and brown people and Native people, right? But I'm white, and the energy did feel militarized, right?
Yeah.
It felt very militarized. But then something happened, and I don't know what that something was. But I'm just gonna have some imagination around it. I think what happened was, as the police force showed up, they were told it's 100 clergy people. Well, they don't know. I mean, are they? Maybe we're just cosplaying, in our robes and our stoles. But they got there, and I feel like once they had organized themselves and ready to make the arrest, they realized, wait a second, these aren't cosplayers. These are actual clergy. They're not going to be violent. They are praying, and they're not stopping with their prayers. And all of a sudden I felt the air shift. And that's when the arrests started happening, and they happened in a way that had, strangely enough, a gentleness to that.
Yeah.
At least the officer that arrested me, he helped me up from the ground. He read, said, do you understand you're under arrest, right? But once he helped me off of my knees and led me to the bus where we all ended up, in our zip tie handcuffs, that whole energy shifted, because as clergy, we were showing the love of God, and that love had a power to change things. And that's what I took away from that day. And it wasn't just about me, because you're right, it's not about me. It was about God has the power. When we ground ourselves in love and ultimate good, however you want to name it, that power can change hearts, and it can change relationships. And we're seeing it happen all over the city right now. We're seeing it in the Somali women. I was at the memorial for Alex Preddy this weekend, and there was a group of Somali women who came with such joy and energy with their Somali tea and their sambusas, and they were handing out that hot tea and the sambusas to everybody who was trying to mourn and be a neighbor, right? And it just increased that energy around that memorial into an energy of good. And also, when I was at the singing vigil in Northeast Minneapolis on Saturday, same thing. A bunch of neighbors, mothers with newborn babies, strapped to their chest underneath their jackets, fathers with their toddlers on their shoulders. There were some military retired veterans who were there. You had 20-year-olds to 70-year-olds. We were all marching through the streets of northeast Minneapolis, singing about goodness and kindness and grace and good. And you could feel the energy of the people in their homes who came out to bear witness to that, to thank us, but again, it wasn't about us, right? But to say thank you because good is ultimately the way forward. Love is the way forward. And to see other neighbors in their windows that appeared probably they were locked, right? Locked windows, locked doors, and we showed them hope. We showed them hope through song, through bearing witness to love, and it changes things. And that's the thing that evil doesn't understand. It doesn't understand it. I am so proud to be here in Minneapolis right now, to be a part of this movement, and to be a part of, I think, of what our churches are all starting to rise up and be called into this, right? Because it is a moment. Do you want to be in the way of love, or do you want to be in the way of hate? And that hate is such a burden to bear, right? As so many people before us, like Dr. King, would have said, hate is a great burden to bear. But love is what unites and connects. And love has hot tea and sambusas.
Time it.
So I too it was beautiful, it was peaceful, kneeling, praying, singing, and then to see the line of police officers come behind us, it got real fast.
Yeah.
And I felt that presence, the police officer who arrested me was so gentle and kind, told me his name, asked me mine, and I was thinking, am I supposed to tell him anything? I was a little confused, but just the kindness, and I was so struck by how it was so different than what we've been seeing with the ICE agents. Like there were protocols, and there were rules to play by, and there were kind of rules of engagement, which is not what we've been seeing with the ICE agents. But in terms of being zip-tied, he kept saying he wasn't going to make it tight, but he made mine tight. I think it maybe was by accident, but when we sat on that bus they were on for a while, and there were times when I got a little bit panicky, and then I would just think, I'd just breathe, but then I was thinking, I cannot even imagine having my ankles shackled and my wrists and being on a plane and being deported. So I just kind of like, get a grip, Lewis. This is nothing. And that's what I keep thinking about. What a sense of panic that must be for frightened people who don't even know where they're going, to be on those planes, shackled. So it was real having that, but we were released. It was easy.
Yeah.
But I just keep coming back to what it must be like on those planes.
One of the powerful things for me in that moment too was how many clergy beyond the 100 or so that were in that line were in front of us, and also protesting, but not in the road. And it gave me a lot of strength to just see faces of equal ID and recognized who were there for us, to support us in what we were doing, and taking pictures and documenting and bearing witness in a different way. That was also equally important. And I really felt the power of community in the middle of that. The different ways that people showed up was really heartening.
I've asked this question to a couple of people, and some people have gotten it right away. Other people just need one more explanation of the question itself. But what I keep coming back to questioning, especially as I talk to faith leaders, is the current conflict that we're seeing right now. Is it at its root a political issue that faith leaders are speaking out on? Or is it a faith issue that has become politicized?
I think it depends a little bit on your definition of political, because I want to take that out of partisanship, because I don't think it's about Republicans and Democrats as much as people of either party want to make it that. I see it, though, as deeply political in the sense that politics is about how we live together as people. And politics is something that has been part of the church since its very existence. And I do think that it is both political and religious at the same time in that way, that this is deeply about how we as communities and as human beings can live together in this world and in this community. I think it's partisanship that can say that this is about just people following the process and the laws of immigration, and we need laws for people to follow. But if it was really about that, I think you wouldn't have ICE agents showing up at immigration court to detain people who are going through that very process. I don't think you would have people who are here legally on temporary protected status or some other status who then all of a sudden, when that status gets reversed, now all of a sudden they're illegal and they can go be arrested and detained. I think that's a disingenuous way of living as a political body, a body of people living together in community. And that's where I think the faith comes in for me in terms of saying what is actually true. And what's actually true is that that our neighbors are our neighbors, and literally, spiritually, physically, communally, that as a person of faith, I am called to love my neighbor. And I don't ask them for their immigration status when I love them to determine if I'm called to love them or not. I'm just called to love them. And that's where the political and the faith really, to me, come together.
Yeah, I just to bounce off what you just said, the word politics really just means the organizing of society, and how do we organize society. And my faith in how I understand Jesus, and how I understand Jesus talking about the kingdom of God, which is a politic of God, right? And the politic of God is one where the immigrant, right? Let's see, it's the immigrant, the foreigner, the neighbor, the other has a place at the table. It's where you have a tax collector who has a place at the table, right? Who would have been part of that evil system, right? The individual, though, was called out of that system and into being at the table, right? And learning a new way of how to be in community. And then, of course, those who have nothing or little, the poor, right? The people who the society has deemed other or not worthy. In our case, it's people who are Black, brown, and Native, right? That the politics of the kingdom of God bring them to the center of the community and help the community remember that they are part of the community, right? Period. And so what does that look like for us to live in a time where right now we are trying to keep this into the chaos of politics? But as faith leaders and as a person of faith, I'm always trying to say, how do I go beyond that chaos and go into the kingdom of God understanding of how we organize society and how we organize being together with one another? And that's a different way. We call it, I think, the third way of Jesus, right? Like Jesus was always about the third way, because human beings are always going to say, you're going to put it in the middle and you're going to say it's either black or white. And Jesus says it's neither. It's a third way. So for me, I think it has to start with the conversation about faith in the kingdom of God and the politics of God. And then we can talk about the rest.
I would just say really simply that the pastoral is political. That there is no, if we love an individual, we're concerned about how they thrive within the society we live in. So if we love a particular person and that person is hurting, we want to make sure that the systems aren't going to continue to hurt them. Mm-hmm. It's a false dichotomy between pastoral and political.
The last thing I really want to hear from the three of you is just if people were to take away one thing from hearing from you, your experience going through this whole process, what would you want that to be? We can go down the line. What would you want anyone to hear this, to hear from you?
Start on that end.
Oh my gosh. It's so strangely enough, I'm going to be very Methodist here. And John Wesley had the 3 simple rules for life that we Methodists have to, when we're ordained, we are set, to abide by them. And the 3 simple rules are this: to do no harm, to do good, and to stay in love with God. And if there's anything that I think that experience at the airport left me with, was the lived, embodied experience of those 3, of doing no harm, of doing good, staying in love with God.
I think I would say that even in the midst of pain and fear and violence, there is so much joy and creativity and community and love happening here in the midst of all of this. I've seen people show up in so many amazing ways, doing such a wide variety of different things for each other, and that's the really beautiful, hopeful thing that I see in the middle of this. That whether you are somebody who rarely comes to Minneapolis and that gets afraid when you come here, or you're someone who's lived here your whole life, Minneapolis is an amazing place, and we are amazing in part because of the immigrant communities that are living here among us, and that joy and love radiates from the center of it.
Well, in terms of the arrests themselves and that action that we were part of, I felt strongly called to do that. And some people have said, I could never do that. How could you do that? And everyone is called in different ways to step up, whether it's delivering food and so I guess that would be the thing, is that what is it that you feel like, how does love transform your actions? How does your sense of justice and the desire for seeing every person as a beloved child of God, how does any of us show up, and what are you called to do to show up? I felt truly called to be at the airport with these fine people. What are you called to do? And I do believe that we all have it in us to want to show up for our neighbors. That's right. Whatever way that might be.
Yeah.
I appreciate the three of you for taking an hour on your Sunday, sitting down, talking a little bit more. I think people are going to benefit from hearing from the three of you. So thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. If this is your first time listening to Bigger Than Belief, thank you for checking this podcast out. We are a weekly interfaith podcast through WCCO television in Minneapolis, with a whole goal of sharing real faith stories of people living in our community and beyond, but also to understand the big issues we've seen in our community and analyze them through a faith lens. The last month or so, that's largely been focused on Operation Metro Surge and its impacts. But in the weeks ahead, we're hoping to share as many stories on as many topics as we possibly can. If you enjoyed this episode or found it interesting, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. Plus, please rate this podcast 5 stars if you haven't. That helps us get seen by as many people as we possibly can. Lastly, please share this with a friend or tell a friend about this episode. We'll be right back next Thursday, February 19th. In the meantime, folks, please stay safe and stay warm. We'll see you next time.